You are given $2 trillion and 20 years to build something in the USA. What do you build? Sapphire said. It's said to build something in the USA. A space elevator can only be built on the equator. It simply won't work otherwise. Not to mention the required exotic materials that isn't known to exist. Elipid said. Stage 1. Annex an equatorial country and make it a US state. Pick one with a corrupt dictator and you could probably buy one for a few billion. Edit. Essay acute o and Tome Sao Tome and Principe would be a good candidate if close enough to the equator. Very friendly with the US already. Citizens have a strong belief in freedom like the US and there's only 200,000 people so you could pay everyone to join the US. YAA40 said. 2 office chairs for the military. You reminded me of this exchange from Duck Soup, 1933. Rufus T. Firefly, now that you're Secretary of War, what kind of an army do you think we ought to have? Chakalani, well, I tell you what I think we should have a standing army. Rufus T. Firefly, why should we have a standing army? Chakalani, because then we save money on chairs. Muskarch said. Greenland is honestly too easy. With 2 trillions in 20 years you can easily take over Greenland and make it look legal too. Flood it with us immigrants, and then let them have a referendum to join us. It's too sparsely populated and too close to us. With 20-year time, we would only need to send 4,000–5,000 settlers into the area each year to achieve demographic supermajority, which is easily doable with financial incentive from $2 trillion budget. Then we just sail our huge navy there, a short trip easily within our home base logistics. And it's done. Flying Fuck said. Sounds really depressing. Is this temporary? I had to quit a job once because despite it being close to my home it was impossible to reach in less than 90 minutes. By car it should be 10 minutes, but that part of town was in perpetual traffic jam. There was no direct bus, so with waiting on bus stops plus the traffic jam it was 90 minutes again, despite the bus lanes. And on foot it was 90 minutes as well. 3 hours commute, for a job that required me to work 2–3 hours out of the 8 hours I was in the office. Fuck that. Hope you find something better as soon as possible. You sound at the end of your tether. Evil Weevil said. In the larger cities and urban areas it's often mediocre at best. In suburban areas, it's shitty. Anywhere else, yeah it's pretty non-existent. I live in a small city in Maine and we've got a bus system that is far from convenient but will get the job done within the city if you're willing to hike a half a mile or more to your bus stop. But if you go just a few miles outside the city, you're in basically rural Maine and there's nothing. I think a lot of the US is like that because there is a lot of rural land out there. Also there's a whole history of automobile industry lobbying against public transport in favor of interstate system and highway infrastructure. Etc. Etc. Edit. Okay, just to clarify, cause I'm learning maybe this isn't common parlance everywhere. When I say half a mile to the bus stop, that's not a specific distance. That is a phrase used to imply an unspecified somewhat long distance meaning it's not miles and miles away but it's not close by. Regardless, my point wasn't that half a mile is too far to walk for a bus stop, but that I live in a small city, 35,000 people, where public transport is functional if not the most convenient, but if you go just a couple miles outside the city there's nothing. Carbon Fiber Deeper said. Build several huge dollar science competitions and grants for carbon recapture, climate cooling, heat harvesting, sustainable plant-based meats, especially fish, and ocean cleanup. Karma Dumpster said. It would take decades to build, possibly 100 years, probably cost way more than $2 trillion, be absurdly expensive to maintain and make zero economic sense. There would be massive waves hitting it, so potential times it is unsafe to drive on. You would need multiple rest stops on the bridge and fuel stations, motels with parking etc. You would need to build at crazy depths. You would need emergency services, police and ambulance facilities to be built. If we had a Turkmenistan-style arrogant dictator, then I guess technically possible yes. It makes literally zero sense though. Shira Cheshire said. Ooh, and since we're doing this all at once, can they all work off a single payment system? Obviously prices would still vary depending on certain factors, but I want to be able to boop card scanners with just one card and go all the way across the country. No more buy a bus pass card in place A to get to place B where you have to pay in cash like a caveman to get to point C where there is exactly one beaten up old machine that spits out a paper ticket that will bring you to point D where you have to download their bus app. Shira Cheshire said, "Sort of. If you're just going around a single city, probably not. But if you want to travel a long distance, especially across states, you are going to be dealing with a large number of totally different bus systems. I had a minor dose of annoyance just a few days back with this. I wanted to visit my hometown, but one bus I needed to take worked on a totally different system. It was frustrating to go from my normal bus system, clean, well-organized, modern, info easily available, one card for going anywhere, to the weird system outside my city, poorly maintained, considerably more expensive, cash only, website old-looking and unclear, weird system of paper passes where you need a different pass based on things like what station you're leaving from, broken air conditioner, etc." Kati Orfasioff said, "As a native San Diegan, I feel this. Our public transit is such garbage and the combination of urban sprawl and NIMBYs have made it virtually impossible for things to get better here. The fact that they're expanding the trolley line up through La Jolla right now is honestly a miracle. I can probably even guess that you were on the 215 bus where it's either haha fuck you you're in downtown North Park now depending on which direction you were headed when you missed its stop." 7oft9 said, "I would build hundreds of huge apartment blocks with thousands of rooms. Each one would be rentable by the month year for a very affordable price. The rooms would be self-contained with a bathroom, kitchen, living area and bedroom. They would have a modular design that would be easy to clean repair between occupants. There would be community-owned shops, markets and restaurants on the ground floor. Priority would go to helping residents establish businesses there. One of the units would be dedicated to in-house fabricating of replacement parts for the apartments above. There'd be a communally owned top-floor social area with a subsidized bar restaurant cafeteria, outdoor space, gym etc. There would be an online system hosted in the building designed to foster social activity, introduce you to other guests, allow discussions to take place etc. This system would be tied into all the other apartment blocks so guests could choose to swap to another venue if they wanted, either temporarily or permanently." Basaman said, "High-speed not underground rail costs about 60 million a mile so 2 trillion buys 33,333 miles give or take let's call it 35,000 and assume we get some efficiency with scale. Also I assume this means the largest city in every state plus every city that is over 500k population so I'm guessing you end up around 60-70 cities assuming they just need to be connected to the closest large city and maybe summer hubs I think you could do it. The average distance would need to be 500 miles or less to use 35k total miles of maglev track. Reasonable to assume that underground is only needed for portions emo." Evidently Empirical said, "I build the largest solar farm in the world, out in the goddamn desert of Arizona near Yuma. At least part of the money would be spent on grid-scale battery solutions. Not lithium-ion, I want something that will still work 20 years from now with a daily discharge cycle. I'm thinking molten metal batteries, but I'd have a competition between various battery MFGs to see which tech comes out on top. This place would power a good chunk of the US, carbon-free, for cheap. There would have to be a very minor fee, just to pay the workers to maintain the solar farm, basically wash the damn things once in a while and replace panels wiring that's not working. Extra money coming in beyond what's needed for expansion disaster recovery funds would go directly to a separate fund for expansion. Eventually I want to power the whole goddamn nation." Phoenix Silva said, "Improving the nation's transportation infrastructure. Not just spending money on projects though, wouldn't be enough. Some would be spent on marketing, building public support and if even possible, hype, for new, forward-looking transportation infrastructure. The goal would be to get private sector interest in investment, as well as federal, state, and local political interest and pressure into widespread continued investment until we've updated all of the transportation infrastructure in the nation to support the next 50+ years of our transportation needs." Calipian linguist said, "Giant solar farms and storage batteries in Nevada and the Mojave in order to reduce or, if possible eliminate all fossil fuel-produced energy from the Western US. Maybe even make solar the sole source of energy. I know how good nuclear is but solar is pretty low maintenance and, More importantly, doesn't require massive levels of training and certification to be able to work on, meaning it would be easier to provide jobs to locals rather than flying in expensive contractors. Massive desalination plants in California powered by nuclear reactors in order to reduce the stress on natural water sources and help ease droughts in the Western US. Improving existing infrastructure and building new roads and bridges to improve transport links between the southern and northern states and the eastern US. Building affordable housing in order to make home ownership achievable for lower-income families in low-rent apartment complexes, especially in expensive cities, in order to reduce the burden on low-earning workers. Marsman 121 said, "This is the thing no one ever talks about. The naysayers always throw out, it will cost X. We can't afford that," without ever mentioning how much we currently pay. Medicare for all will cost $30 trillion over 10 years, while current costs with no farther cost increases will cost us $38 trillion over 10 years. Funny how they always leave that last part out. It's the same with free college too. US Department of Education estimated it would cost about $75 billion a year to pay for college. Sounds like a lot until you consider the US already pays $90 billion a year on various tax breaks, aid, etc. for college students. Yes, it's not always a one, but all the people who say we can't afford it never factor in the money we are already paying. Stardust Sheen said, "A better education system. So much of what's wrong with our country comes down to human stupidity, poor education, and unequal access to quality schools." Lots of great ideas in this thread, but think about what 20 years of better, smarter Americans could do for everything from racism to public transportation to climate change to politics. Especially if the school systems also addressed issues such as mental health, life skills, and food insecurities. If everyone had a quality post-secondary education or training, they would have enough employment opportunities that bosses would be forced to treat their employees better or risk losing them. If teachers were paid better, we might get better teachers. If all students were required to attend public school, then parents in affluent neighborhoods would be incentivized to invest in the public school system, and if we had larger, better organized school districts with the money distributed more equitably, lower-income neighborhoods would benefit from the trickle-down effect. Children would be exposed to ideas outside their own family echo chamber. People in restrictive cults couldn't use lack of proper education to keep their offspring dependent on the hive mind. Regular contact with the outside world would mean more opportunities for abuse to get noticed and reported. Frostbite62 said, "Private research university focused on STEM. From undergrad to PhD, I feel like I could foster a better STEM R1 institution than the vast majority of institutions out there. I'd need the ability to micromanage when necessary, which is why I can't do more than STEM, as I've no experience with non-STEM fields like humanities. I've observed institutions, public and private, mismanage assets, endowments, faculty, and students. I've seen them drastically undervalue their institutions and make mistakes accordingly. Universities are built and destroyed in boardrooms at tables of less than 20 people. With $2 trillion of my own funding, board members would be unnecessary, which is already a huge step forward for my vision. Not needing to please investors, boosters, marketing firms, athletic managers, etc. would allow for a lot more flexibility regarding how each department would be able to run. The United States used to take pride in research and the government used to foster it. For decades, now, they've shown no indication of going back, so someone needs to step up." Theirfault said, "An AI-based personalized education system which automates teacher style and responses to child need. I deliver it at point of need for every child in the U.S. Parents have some input to the modules their child receives. Aspects of biology or religion can be included, omitted as they require. As well as the 3 R's, training and critical thinking, however, is mandatory. As is a thorough understanding of compound interest, pros and cons of countries outside the U.S., entrepreneurial activities, nutrition, and the scientific method. I feel like this sort of thing could solve a lot of the problems in the USA, and it'd pay for itself many times over in income and other taxes, as well as improving the well-being of citizens." AskRedditor said, "This could be so good, open source would be awesome. I would just say this shouldn't ever be publicly funded. You don't want to give politicians this kind of power. The issues are the data that would be collected on every person, and the potential to centrally influence and indoctrinate the population. This power has been proven too much corporations, and I know it is definitely too much for politicians. And whatever governing body is put in charge of deciding this curriculum will inevitably be infiltrated or influenced by groups that would benefit from the influence and indoctrination of the kids. Edit. Releasing the AI for open source might work. Then the curriculums would continue to be generated as they are now, just with an enhanced teacher aid. Sarcastic Diverman said, "Why would you omit teaching a fundamental part of science at the parent's discretion? That is exactly the problem at the moment. Religiously skewed teaching criteria limit a child's ability to learn. The focus should be the STEM subjects, followed by fitness and arts. Any religious teaching should just be an overview of all religions to allow an unbiased understanding of their differences and their similarities. Teaching should be a method of providing the facts and resources to learn, not limiting what and how it should be learned. If you want the next generation to help fix the mess that the planet is continuing to become, you should promote free thinking in a safe, unbiased environment. If a child has a desire to follow a religion, so be it, but don't indoctrinate it into them before they get a glimpse of the bigger picture. You will just limit their true potential." AskReddit said, "Inpatient mental health facilities to restore and rehabilitate most of the broken penal system. Universal healthcare. Overhaul the bloated secondary education programs in order to staff the already understaffed healthcare world in new mental health facilities. Students studying for in-demand careers should not only get tuition waived, but a stipend with room and board, much like a military recruit. This is a government's investment in its future success. Make sure students from at-risk areas are given the chance to break the cycle. While we're at it, police officers will be required to be at these schools to have a degree in licensure that can be revoked and or inspected, much like those in the healthcare field. 20 years, $2 trillion. I feel like this would fix quite a bit. This is a fun what-if hypothetical. Don't take it too seriously." Traditional Newt 4172 said, "I actually think about this a lot. Backstory is small towns around here. Kids have nothing to do and towns are run by old white people who pass curfews where kids can't even walk in town after 8. Of course a lot get in trouble. Always wish someone with millions would finance a real youth center. Sports from tennis to swimming, huge. Maybe training for trades to win tables for chess lessons and other games, whatever. It'd take 20 years to get it right. How to keep them, more than one, I mean all over the place. Keep the usual drugs etc. out. Make it a massive place for kids to be productive. Blow off all that energy. Be safe. Free for the kids. Paid staff." Toneboat said, "I'd buy out the DNC and RNC every congressman, legislator and politician in the fucking country and turn those fuckers into low-paid wage slave factory workers while I watch through a glass office window, cranking up the thermostat by 2 degrees every 30 minutes. They'd be denied healthcare, education, and price gouged and forced deeper into medical debt every time they injured themselves. Their pay rate would be capped at 7.25 hours and they'd have to live at least an hour away from the factory. Their misery will be live-streamed 24/7. Ted Cruz will be assigned to clean toilets using only his tongue." Clegg said, $100 billion to build new nuclear plants and secure sites to store the waste. The new designs don't produce as much waste, but people are still scared of it. $50 billion for wind, solar, tidal power, pumped hydro storage. $100 billion to equip new housing with solar panels, batteries, and geothermal heat pumps. $500 billion to build real high-speed commuter rail networks, one on the West Coast, one in the Southeast, one in the Northeast, one in the Upper Midwest, and a few lines connecting them. $50 billion for buses in major cities. $50 billion to build biking and pedestrian infrastructure. $100 billion for grants to cities in exchange for liberalizing zoning and building dense housing commercial spaces in walkable areas around transit hubs. $200 billion to NASA for space exploration. $100 billion to various conservation projects around the country. $100 billion as a fund to pay displaced workers from fossil fuel jobs. The rest will have to be used to bribe a bunch of politicans who will try to stop all of this." Twanline said, "I would build a lasting legacy. Set up an endowment fund which could use a portion of the annual growth, which would be in the tens of billions, to do good things, with a focus on climate change. The endowment would spend slowly enough to keep growing over time, and thus keep distributing more over time as well. Retire coal plants and build solar wind farms. Buy up land to be used for wildlife and tree planting to help sequester some carbon. Invest in transit, especially high-speed intercity, and even cross-continental travel to reduce car and plane use for such trips. Provide some incentives to swap to EVs, promote new battery tech, increase building energy efficiency, etc. Buy up and shut down environmentally unsustainable agriculture, like a lot in California, and move it elsewhere while also creating new, local industries instead. Such as building all the solar panels and batteries and high-speed rail I will need for my other projects. Spin-off effect, the endowment would own so much it could influence these companies into being more climate change friendly. Skeptical said. A city built and maintained mainly by for the homeless. You got no place to live? No job? No opportunities? Panhandle for a bus ticket and come on down. You work 8 hours a day at one of the many jobs a city requires to function, sanitation, construction, retail, etc., and your pay stub guarantees you a livable home, utilities included. Break the law or go more than 6 weeks without work? We'll do what other cities do and stick you on a bus to some other city. You had your shot. Maybe have a cooling off period and then you get to try coming back. Most homeless people aren't addicts or criminals or severely mentally ill, they just need a hand to get out of the hole life has chucked them into. The way our society treats its cast-offs is just despicable tbh. They deserve better and we can do better. We'd just rather full corporate slush funds than take care of people who need a shower and a roof over their heads. Frank Datto said. I get it's political, but we have had Democrat and Republican presidents during the war. All of them fucked it up. Congress fucked it up. As usual, money was the main focus. Gotta keep the military-industrial complex going. Gotta keep those bomb and weapon makers in business. Gotta keep their friends rich and powerful. Also, oil. That yummy black stuff that makes go-go juice for our engines. Not to mention average people stopped giving a shit about the war. We just kinda forgot unless something crazy happened or an American soldier died, but even then it was like a 30-second blurb on MSM, then it was back to politicians getting on cable news channels and attacking the other side like it still is now. I am wondering what the new boogeyman will be now. What will the USA military do now? These companies who make all these arms and bombs. I know they export lots of them, but I can assume Iraq and Afghanistan was their cash cow. Maybe we invade Africa now and fight a proxy war with China and their influence in the region? Hell, who knows? Miracle Quip said. My priorities, in order. Rural and municipal broadband access that is reliable, affordable, and just as good as what you can get in the best areas of the city. So much of what's wrong with the USA is a direct result of the fact that high-income urban areas effectively live in the future compared to rural and low-income urban areas. A federal program, based on clinical trial design, that creates, assesses, and implements improvements in education. Funded at the federal level, with control shared between local, state, and federal officials. The best ideas get tested in multiple places and have nationwide support, complete with cohort data by the time they are implemented nationwide. KitKat0333 said. Speedrail, improved roads, solar farms ALLL throughout Death Valley, also integrated PV public amenities, non-toxic water systems, shit ton of public parks and gardens, more thorough public library, the ones that lend out tools and housewares and access to expensive equipment like 3D printers, civic centers in towns in need of one, more daycares with trained employees, advanced farms with modern low-impact practices, hello vertical farming, more conserved national forests, public Wi-Fi network access spots, down-facing blue light street lamps, better public transit like metros and trams where best suited, safe and public greenways for walking access in dense urban areas, oceanic plastics collection devices. A derelict satellite retrieval program would be great. Make the sky prettier again. I'd buy out for-profit prisons and exchange most of them with rehabilitation practices, with the others receiving humane oversight practices and regulations, harmful producers and distributors, cough nestle cough, and reverse harmful business practices. Robert 66 said. I would buy some cheap rural land in Wyoming and would strive to build the perfect or as close to fully green, self-sustaining town as a template. It combines the best aspects of technology but with Amish, non-religious, lifestyle. Everything is fully redundant and built to last forever. Built in a way so it's cheap and no one is homeless. Let's call it Science Town. Sounds crazy, but I wish humanity could have a goal to shoot for that's more down to earth and benefits everyone, and something that can help the rest of society. Draxironi said. A little late to the post, so I doubt anyone will see this, but I've given a lot of thought to what I'd do with a fortune if I ever became rich. Communities for the homeless population, factories for the means of production and jobs for the homeless, and continued income, and nature preserves all around the communities to raise the worth of the land and preserve the environment. I could quite literally end American homeless, turn the economy around, and become richer than anyone in the entire world. I would then use my growing fortunes to set up further nature preserves, import endangered species, in a calculated fashion to avoid destroying local ecosystems, and plant literal forests to combat the ever-growing deforestation and pollution issues. The best part being they would be privately owned by me, so all hunting and logging would be banned. Of course some poachers will come, but I'd turn the areas into parks and employ rangers to oversee it. Spending everything I have in excess of an upper middle class income. I want to live comfortably, to better the area around me. Banana Pumpkin Eater said. Free healthcare. The USA is so incredibly fucked compared to the rest of us. That includes free mental health care, and addiction services. Also funding for the indigenous people for housing, education, return of stolen lands and spiritually prominent places, and rights given back to them for access to their waterways and forests. Also tear down the entire structure of the police and starting from the ground up, including getting rid of all sheriff departments to make all police training the same in every single state. Strictly no assholes allowed, and every single person injured or killed by a police weapon has their case reviewed by a separate entity. Firearms training once a month that includes disarming training using non-lethal force as the main tactic, and de-escalating situations as the first means of communication with the suspect. And any racist fuckers getting blacklisted from all police jobs in every state. I think I ran out of money for now, lol.